Welcome to our deep dive today. We're going to be talking about grief and how to cope with it. We've got some excerpts from articles and toolkits from positivepsychology.com, and we're hoping to give you some helpful ways to deal with grief. Not just theories, but some real tools, like writing a letter to the deceased and creating rituals.
It's going beyond just knowing about grief. It's about doing something about it, right?
Yeah. So the first source is called A Fine Line Between Avoidance and Helpful Distraction. And it talks about how, well, when you lose someone, you just want to avoid the pain, don't you?
It's a natural reaction, isn't it, when something hurts that badly?
Yeah. The source says that trying to avoid grief altogether isn't helpful, but sometimes distractions can give you the strength to deal with it later.
Like you need a break when you're lifting weights so you can go back and lift more later.
Exactly. The source even suggests that you categorize your activities into unhelpful avoidance or helpful distractions.
So you can be more mindful about what actually helps you.
Yeah, like mindlessly scrolling through social media versus, I don't know, taking a walk in nature.
Right. You might be distracting yourself from grief either way, but one helps you face it later and the other just numbs you out.
Then there's this source called A Letter to the Deceased. It talks about how unfinished business and regrets can make grief even harder.
You know, when you think about it, yeah, it makes sense. When there are things you wish you'd said or hadn't said or apologies that never happened.
Just adds to the pain of saying goodbye, doesn't it?
Right. Like missed goodbyes, or maybe you didn't get to tell them you loved them enough, or arguments you never resolved. It's tough.
It really is. So what can you do?
This source says write them a letter. It doesn't have to be a real letter, though. It could be in a journal or a poem, even song lyrics, just get it out.
It's like getting those unspoken words out somehow.
Exactly. Finding some resolution, even if they aren't there.
Okay, and then these excerpts from Analyzing My Way of Grieving talk about faith, which can be a big part of grief for people. It sounds like you're feeling drawn to church, but at the same time, not protected by God. It's like grief makes you question everything.
Well, yeah, it's not just about feelings. It's about your whole belief system.
Yeah.
What you believe about God, religion, even life and death.
Grief really can touch every part of you.
Yeah. And it can be scary, but it can also help you understand yourself and the world in a deeper way.
The next source is called Bigger Than Grief, and it talks about how losing someone, especially someone close, can impact how you see yourself.
It's true. When someone is such a big part of your life and they're suddenly gone, it's like, who am I now?
Right. It's almost like part of you is missing. But this source says it's really important to remember that you're more than just your grief. Like, you have other roles and strengths.
Yes. You have whole life outside of that relationship, a whole identity.
They suggest writing I am statements, which seems so basic, but...
But it can help you remember all those other parts of yourself. The parent, the artist, whatever is important to you.
Yeah, those pieces of yourself might be hidden under all the grief.
It's empowering, actually, to reclaim them.
Yeah.
It reminds you that your life still has meaning and purpose.
Okay, let's talk about rituals. This source, Continuing the Bond to the Deceased Through Ritual, is all about honoring and remembering the person and keeping that connection alive.
It's not about letting go completely, right?
Right.
It's about adapting to a new reality while still keeping them in your life somehow.
Exactly. And rituals can be a way to do that, like celebrating their birthday still, or visiting a place you shared, cooking their favorite meal.
It's like a tangible way to show your love and remember them.
Yeah, and to feel their presence even though they're not physically there.
Exactly. You're not replacing them or pretending they aren't gone. You're just finding ways to honor them and the impact they had on you.
And what I like is that it can be whatever feels right for you,
Absolutely. The most important thing is that it's authentic and meaningful to you, not something you feel you should do.
Okay, so the next source, Creating Rituals Around Loss, says that rituals can also help with the chaos and lack of control you feel when you're grieving.
It's about giving yourself some structure, some peace in a time that feels very out of control.
Right. And it doesn't have to be anything complicated, does it?
No, not at all. Even small things can be powerful, like lighting a candle every day or carrying their picture with you. It's the thought that counts.
I love that. It's about finding those small ways to feel connected and create meaning, not about adding more pressure.
Exactly. It's the intention behind it that matters, the feeling you put into it. It can bring comfort and stability when things feel so uncertain.
Now let's talk about journaling. Journaling Through Grief in 40 Days talks about how writing can help you process your emotions. Have you ever found that just writing things down helps you understand them better?
Oh, definitely. Journaling is a powerful tool, it really is. It gives you a safe space to work through all those feelings, all the complicated thoughts, all the messy emotions. And this source, it gives you prompts for 40 days, which can be a good place to start.
Especially if you're feeling overwhelmed or don't know where to begin, it's like having a guide for your grief journey.
Right. Even if you don't use the prompts exactly as they are, just having that structure can make it less scary to start.
All right, let's try something different. Metaphors. Metaphors of Grief says that metaphors can help us make sense of grief when words just aren't enough.
Yeah, sometimes you just can't put it into words, can you?
Yeah.
Metaphors give you a whole new language to express those really big, hard to explain emotions. Like they say grief is a roller coaster or a wound or a tornado or even phantom limb pain.
Each one gives you a different way to look at it, to understand those confusing, conflicting feelings.
And sometimes, a simple metaphor can just hit you in the gut, make you feel seen and understood better than any explanation could.
Now, this next source, People Supporting You As You Grieve, is about using a tool called a social support eco map. It basically helps you see who's in your support network and what kind of support they give you.
So you can tell who's really there for you, who's just neutral, and who might even be adding stress to your life.
It's like a map of your relationships and how they affect you emotionally.
And it helps you know where you're strong and where you might need more help. What's great is they actually give you a template in this source, so you can make your own eco map.
It's something you can do after this deep dive to see who's really in your corner.
Exactly. You might be surprised at what you discover. Maybe you have more support than you realized, or maybe you realize you need to reach out to some people for help.
Okay, so reconnecting with the deceased through imagery. This one's a little bit different. It talks about using guided visualizations to stay connected to the person you lost.
It might sound a little strange, but for some people, it can be a powerful way to find comfort. Imagine creating a space in your mind where you can talk to them, express your feelings, feel like they're really there with you.
It's like creating a bridge between the physical and the spiritual world, so you can keep talking to them, even though they're gone.
Right. And, these visualizations have been used a lot in therapy to help people deal with trauma and grief. It's about using the power of your mind to find peace and healing.
Then there's this really beautiful metaphor, restoring the broken mirror. It's about rebuilding your life after a loss, but not by erasing the past.
Yeah, it's about taking all those shattered pieces and creating something new and beautiful. And it's not about forgetting the person or replacing them. It's about finding a way to carry them with you as you move forward.
The source talks about finding things that still bring you joy and purpose, those things that were important to you before, and using them to put your life back together.
Right, it's about finding those sparks of happiness and meaning, even in the midst of all the sadness. And realizing that you can still have a fulfilling life even after a huge loss.
Taking care of the grieving self is a source that reminds us how important self-care is when you're grieving, because grief impacts everything, your body, your mind, your emotions, everything.
It's so easy to forget about yourself when you're in so much pain. But this source reminds us that taking care of ourselves isn't selfish, it's essential. And they talk about focusing on 4 things: sleep, social connections, taking care of your body, and finding ways to soothe yourself.
They even give specific tips, like making sure you have a good sleep routine, connecting with supportive people, exercising gently, and finding things that relax you.
All those things can help you build resilience and give you the strength to keep going when grief feels overwhelming.
The life certificate is such a unique source. It's about creating a tribute to the person you've lost, a way to celebrate their life and make that connection last.
Instead of just focusing on the absence, this is about remembering the good things, their qualities, the special moments, the stories that made them who they were.
And the best part is they give you a template to get started, so you can create something really personal and meaningful.
It's a beautiful way to honor your loved one and keep their memory alive.
The next source, The Right to Grieve in Your Way, is all about acknowledging that there's no one right way to grieve. Everyone's journey is different.
It's so important to remember that you don't have to follow a timeline or compare yourself to anyone else. This source says you have the right to feel your emotions fully, to grieve at your own pace, and to set boundaries with people who aren't supportive.
It's about giving yourself permission to grieve authentically without judgment or pressure.
Exactly. It's your grief, your journey.
Okay, finally, there's Worden's 4 Tasks of Mourning. This one gives us a framework for understanding the grieving process as a series of tasks.
The acronym is TEAR, which stands for To Accept the Reality of the Loss, Experience the Pain of Grief, adjust to a world without the deceased, and reinvest in the new reality while remembering the deceased.
It's not always a linear process, but it gives you a map, you know?
It's a guide to help you navigate all the ups and downs of grief.
And it reminds us that it's a process, it takes time, and it's okay to not be okay.
Right. You don't have to rush it or pretend you're fine.
So what stands out to you most from all this information?
Well, one thing that keeps coming up is this idea of honoring your own experience, finding what works for you, being kind to yourself, and going at your own pace.
There's definitely a sense of hope here, too. Even though grief is hard, these sources show us that it's possible to find meaning, stay connected, and rebuild your life in a way that honors the past and the future.
That's what resilience is all about, right?
Mhm.
It's not just surviving loss. It's growing and changing because of it.
You know, we talked about unfinished business earlier and how that can weigh on you when you're grieving. I keep thinking about that phrase. It's so heavy, you know.
It is, yeah. It makes you think about all those things you wished you could change, things you wish you had said, but you can't go back.
Right. And the source, A Letter to the Deceased, suggested writing a letter as a way to deal with those lingering feelings. Do you think that really helps people?
Well, I've seen it help, yeah. It can be really powerful to finally say all those things you couldn't before, whether it's telling them you love them or saying you're sorry or forgiving them, even just like everyday things you wish you could still share.
And it doesn't have to be an actual letter, right? It could be in a journal or even a song.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The important thing is to express those unspoken words, to get them out somehow. It's not about changing the past, it's about finding peace with it, you know?
So, rituals. I thought it was so interesting how those sources, continuing the bond to the deceased through ritual and creating rituals around loss, talked about finding ways to honor the person you lost. It doesn't have to be a big, complicated thing either.
No, not at all. Sometimes the smallest things can be really meaningful, like just lighting a candle or going to a place that was special to both of you or making their favorite food.
It's a way to keep their memory alive, even though they're gone.
Right. It's like you're still connected to them somehow.
And I also liked how they said rituals can give you a sense of structure when everything feels so chaotic and uncertain.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Rituals can be grounding, you know, like a safe space in all the craziness. It's like you're taking all that emotional energy and channeling it into something positive.
Remember that source, Bigger Than Grief? It talked about how losing someone close can make you question who you are, like part of your identity is gone.
Yeah. That's exactly how it feels. And it can be so disorienting. You don't know who you are without them.
The source stressed that it's really important to remember that you are more than just your grief, that you have a whole life outside of that relationship.
Absolutely. You still have all your strengths, all those other roles you play, your whole personality.
And they had that exercise writing I am statements, which seems simple, but
it can be really powerful. When you write down those things, like I am a parent, I am an artist, whatever it is for you, it's like you're taking back those pieces of yourself that were hidden by the grief.
it's like reminding yourself that you're still a whole person, even without them.
Exactly. And that your life still has meaning and purpose.
I really connected with that metaphor, restoring the broken mirror, about how you can rebuild your life after loss. It's such a beautiful way to think about it, you know?
It really is. It's like, yeah, the pieces are broken, but you can put them back together in a new way. Create something beautiful out of the wreckage.
And it's not about forgetting the person or replacing them. It's about finding a way to move forward while still carrying them with you.
And the source talked about finding things that still bring you joy, things that were important to you before, and using those things to help you rebuild.
Right. It's about finding those little sparks of happiness and realizing that you can still have a fulfilling life even after a loss like that. Taking care of the grieving self. That source talked about self-care, which is so important, but so easy to forget when you're grieving.
It's true. It's like you're so focused on the pain that you neglect yourself completely.
And the source really emphasized that self-care isn't selfish. It's absolutely essential for getting through this.
You need to have the strength to cope with everything you're going through. And they talked about focusing on those 4 things: sleep, connecting with people, taking care of your body, and soothing activities.
Like getting enough sleep, spending time with people who support you, eating well, exercising, finding things that relax you, you know?
All those things can help you feel better physically and emotionally and give you the energy to keep going. What are some things you do for self-care, especially when you're feeling down?
You know, for me, it's all about finding things that calm me down and help me feel grounded, like taking a long bath or reading a good book or being out in nature. Those things always help. What about you?
Those are great. I like doing mindfulness exercises, things like that, and gentle movement like yoga or just going for a walk. It really helps to calm my mind and process everything.
The life certificate. I love the idea of creating a tribute to the person you lost, a way to celebrate their life.
It's a beautiful way to honor them, isn't it? To focus on all the things that made them special.
Instead of dwelling on the fact that they're gone, you're remembering the good things, their qualities, the happy memories. And what's really cool is they give you a template, so you can create something really personal.
It's a great way to keep their memory alive and feel close to them.
The right to grieve in your way, that source was so validating, just reminding you that there's no one right way to grieve.
Everyone's different, there's no timeline, no set of rules.
And it's so important to remember that. This source really highlighted that you have the right to feel your emotions, to grieve at your own pace, and to set boundaries with people who aren't supportive.
Exactly. You don't have to apologize for how you feel or try to fit into someone else's expectations.
You have to do what's right for you. And Warden's 4 tasks of mourning, I thought that was interesting because it gives you a framework for the grieving process, even though it might not always be linear.
Yeah, it's not like a step-by-step guide, The tasks, accepting the loss, feeling the pain, adjusting to life without them, and then reinvesting in life while still remembering them. Those things can happen in any order.
But it's still a helpful guide, a way to understand what you're going through.
It helps you make sense of the chaos, and reminds you that it's a process. It takes time, and you don't have to rush it.
So looking back at all of this information, what are your main takeaways?
It really reinforces the idea that everyone grieves differently, and that it's okay to find your own way, what works for you, and to be kind to yourself along the way.
It's about honoring your own experience, your own pace.
Exactly. And, even though we've been talking about all the tough parts of grief, I think there's a lot of hope in these sources, too. There's meaning to be found, connections to be made, and a way to rebuild your life in a way that honors both the past and the future.
I agree. We've talked a lot about the emotional and practical aspects, but I'm curious, has this experience of loss changed how you think about life or about spirituality?
That's a good question. I think it's made me realize how fragile life is, how quickly things can change. It's like suddenly you appreciate all those little things, all those everyday moments. It's a cliche, but it's true. How about you?
Definitely. It's like you see things with new eyes, You want to make the most of every day, live a life that would make the people you've lost proud. I think it's also made me think more about what I want to leave behind, what kind of impact I want to have on the world.
That's beautiful. It makes me think of that source, Restoring the Broken Mirror, and how you can find meaning in the midst of loss.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think that leads us perfectly into the next part of our conversation. We can explore more about finding meaning and also some practical tips for dealing with the challenges of grief, the emotional and the logistical stuff.
We've talked about a lot of the hard parts of grief, the emotional stuff, the practical challenges, even those big questions about life and death. But now I think it's important to focus on the hope and meaning that can come from loss. Finding those glimmers of light in the darkness.
Yeah, it's true. Grief is definitely painful. There's no denying that. But it can also lead to some really profound growth and change. And one of the most important things to remember during this time is self-compassion, being kind to yourself.
I'm so glad you said that because it's so easy to be hard on ourselves when we're grieving, isn't it? Like we judge ourselves for feeling certain things or not feeling certain things or compare ourselves to other people.
Oh, absolutely. We think we should be doing it differently or we're not doing it right or it's taking too long, whatever. But, like we've talked about, there's no one right way to grieve. Everyone's journey is different. And sometimes the kindest thing you can do is just acknowledge the pain and not judge yourself for it.
Just let yourself feel it, the sadness, the anger, the confusion, all of it. It's okay.
Exactly. No shame, no guilt. Just be where you are. And remember, you're doing the best you can, even when it feels like everything is falling apart.
Remember that source, people supporting you as you grieve? It really talked about how important it is to have support during those times.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Having people around you who can listen without judgment, who can just be there with you, that makes such a huge difference.
You said just be there, and that really struck me. Sometimes that's all you need, someone to just sit with you in your pain without trying to fix it or tell you what to do.
Absolutely. And it's not just about getting support, it's about giving it too. Sometimes helping other people can actually help you heal too.
That's a really good point because it reminds you that you're not alone, that everyone goes through this at some point. Grief can connect us in a way that nothing else can.
That source, Analyzing My Way of Grieving, it talked about those spiritual questions that can come up when you lose someone, like feeling drawn to church, but also feeling abandoned by God.
Yeah, it's like grief makes you question everything you thought you knew about life and death and faith.
And while that can be scary, it can also be a really powerful opportunity for growth.
Like maybe you find a new way of understanding your beliefs, or you find new sources of comfort and meaning.
Or maybe you just come to terms with not knowing all the answers. That's okay too. I was wondering, has this experience of loss changed the way you think about life or about spirituality?
You know, it's funny. It's made me think a lot about how precious time is. It sounds so cliche, but it's true. You start to appreciate those everyday moments more, the simple things you do with the people you love.
I get that. Like you suddenly see how fragile everything is, and you don't want to waste a single moment.
Right. You want to live a life that would make the people you lost proud. It's also made me think more about my own legacy, what I want to leave behind.
I love that. And, it makes me think about that source, Restoring the Broken Mirror, about finding meaning and purpose even in the midst of loss.
Yeah, it's about taking all those broken pieces and creating something new and beautiful. And it's not about erasing the past. It's about finding a way to carry those memories with you as you move forward.
And remembering that healing isn't a straight line. It's messy, it takes time, and there will be ups and downs.
Yeah.
But it's possible. So as we wrap up this deep dive into grief, I just want to say to anyone listening, be kind to yourself. Let yourself feel whatever you're feeling, and don't be afraid to ask for help. And know that even in the darkest times, there's always hope. There's always healing. And you're not alone in this.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We hope it's giving you some valuable insights and maybe even a sense of comfort knowing that other people understand what you're going through. Remember, you're not alone. Take care.